Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and that's where we pick from each week. I've got like about 21 from last week's video written down, something like that. A few things to go over before we jump into questions from last week. Number one, Steph and I are obviously on a trip, and I've been putting up photos over on Instagram. If you don't follow me over on Instagram, it's just at HortTube. And we've been putting up some of the photos as we've gone along here on this trip, and we're continuing the trip. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But we were just in 7 days, we went to the Delaware, that Delaware Botanic Garden. That video will have gone up yesterday as you're watching this. We've been to the Mount Cuba Center and had a tour with director of horticulture there, and a big group of plant people that I know that are just great time. Didn't really film any of that. We took some photos, took some B-roll. We'll probably work it into some sort of travel video later for other gardens we visited that we've kind of done the same thing in. We went to Chanticleer, walked around there. I'm trying to think where else we went in that area, but we had like 7 days of just immersive garden. Oh, Ladue. We went to Ladue Topiary Garden. That video will actually be up sometime this week. So just a wild run there. The Norfolk video went up. Norfolk Botanic Garden video went up this week. If you haven't watched that video, it's such a great garden down in Norfolk. And then the Delaware Botanic Garden video went up yesterday. One of the tour videos went up in the middle of the week. That tour video is in a playlist if you want to watch all the tours all at once. There's 11 videos up so far. I think I have 7 more recorded. As you're watching those videos, they were recorded weeks and weeks ago. So I'm talking about how dry it had been after those videos were shot. We got a lot of rain in the area. So, we've gone from one extreme, Riley had gone from one extreme to the other there. Let's see. Okay, so I'd like to get some, I've done this in the past. If you followed the channel for any length of time, we occasionally do before and after videos from your guys' gardens. So use the horttube@gmail.com email address. And if you have before photos and after photos of your gardens, we'd love to see them. We'd love to share them with folks watching on the channel. I've still got some emails, quite a few actually, of your gardens, and there was for no other reason than I had put up like 5 or 6 of those videos at one time is the only reason I haven't used up some of those photos. So I'm gonna go back and grab some of those. So if you were disappointed that I didn't use your photos or thought they weren't up to some standard or something like that, or I made you feel bad, I apologize. It wasn't anything to do with that. But I have those, and I'll use some of those combined with what folks are sending now if you'd like to participate in that. So there'll be some before and after photo videos going up. And those are always kind of fun to see what you guys have going on in your gardens. So I talk about mine all the time. There's a tool video that went up on the Learn to Garden video series this week. I just pulled out all the tools that I frequently use at the house that went up. And Steph has 2 design videos that are going up hopefully before the end of the month as well. But there's $50 off. You just use the word August to get the $50 off over on the website, horttube.com. Several other things over there as well, including t-shirts, including the t-shirt with Holly on it that I'm wearing. Okay, I'm about to get to questions, I promise. One more thing. We're in, right now, this is a little perennial border at Stephanie's 3rd sister we visited. I'm in Fairfield, Connecticut right now. We went to Delaware and visited her 1st sister, and then we went over to Bel Air, Maryland, and visited her 2nd sister, and now we're visiting a 3rd sister here in Connecticut. And she has this beautiful perennial border going along the edge of the driveway. I thought I'd shoot here. Grassy area. She's growing some tomatoes in a fence because heavy deer pressure in this garden. And I've been here many times before, and you can just see basically herds of deer coming through this place. If you don't fence something off, it's definitely going to get eaten if it's vulnerable, to that at all. But most of these perennials seem to be left alone along the driveway here. Okay, so we're heading from here, and we're heading up through New York up toward we'll end up at Sodas Point up by the lake. And so we're going up kind of through the middle of New York, and then over to Buffalo, around to Toronto, and to Montreal. and coming back around the lake on the other side. If you know of any things, you know, that are in either Ontario or, you know, the middle of New York and I guess that would be the northwest corner of New York up there, that are interesting for us to see or do, let us know down below. We're definitely interested in hearing from you guys who are from this area up here. Let's see. The Pinkham video had gone up the previous week, and we did the Norfolk Botanic Garden video, and it was in the pouring rain. We bolted over to Bill and Linda Pinkham's beautiful garden, not that far from the Botanic Garden, really, maybe 30 minutes or so, 45 minutes. And we had one little gap in the rain, and I walked around with the video, with the camera and video, just a quick walk around, and then it started pouring rain again. So I didn't have a chance to do any other kind of video content there. There were great responses to it, but people definitely wanted the names of the plants, and I totally understand that. We're gonna go back and do a different types of videos in the future, but we had just had a tropical storm there. And you know, there were things like literally perfect real life paradise. Somebody wanted to know what the body of water there is at the Pinkham's house, and that's the James River. If you ever drove through Richmond, James River comes through Richmond, and then it dumps out down there in that Norfolk area. And obviously we'll go back and do some content. It's incredible. It's an absolutely incredible garden. Okay, let's see. So there's a lot of questions about transplanting marginal plants on that video, on the last week's question and answer video. This person has a pineapple guava that they wanted to move. Should they move it sooner or later? I'm guessing if you're saying it's a marginal plant, then you're up in zone 7B or 8A or something like that. You know, it's definitely not the best time to put something under stress right before it goes into winter if it's marginal. So, you know, I'll leave that up to you. It's not so late. It's not like it's October or something like that. But for me, I would probably wait to move that thing until, if you could, and you know, until April next year. And I think you'd get away with it a little bit better and leave it protected. You know, leave the roots protected and leave it, you know, if it's doing well in whatever space it's in and has been able to survive, it might be best in that spot through the winter. Okay. Number 3, I counted that Pinkham video comments and everything as a question. Well, what body of water? That was a question, right? Okay. Can Edgeworthia be planted 3 feet from a chain link fence? Is that too close? So I think the plant would be fine, but I think it ultimately would look awkward. One of the cool things about Edgeworthia is how structural it grows. And I pointed that out in the tour videos, one of the 11 tour videos, you know, it grows, every single time it starts new growth, it branches into 3, and then it branches into 3 and branches into 3. And because of that, it fills in all the area and it creates this perfect little dome shape over time. If you put it 3 feet from a fence, the back of it's going to be flat, and then you'll still get the dome shape on one side. So it'll still look okay from your side. I mean, it's not like you got to go stand on the other side of the fence and look at it. I think the plant will be fine, but it won't grow into that kind of perfect shape that it takes when they're unpruned and when you don't have to cut on them. Let's see. Or should they plant it in open space? Probably more open space, yeah, because they want it to thrive. Again, I don't think planting it that close is going to hurt the plant. It's just going to hurt the overall look of it in the future. Okay, name of the first song in the garden tour that we use a lot, and we do use it a lot. And it was in the Delaware video yesterday. It's called Happy Mandolin. I got it on YouTube. The free music that they allow us to use on YouTube videos where we don't have to pay for music. I need to go find another song. I've used that song way too many times, but it is a good one. And you can always turn them, some people, it's always so funny. If I put music on something, I either get great music or why is there music on it? You know, we can just mute it. And then I'll put the bird sounds underneath it. You know, a lot of times I use the bird sounds that were recorded in my own garden. Because it's hard to get natural sounds. When we're touring the Norfolk Botanic Garden and I try to get natural sound, like maybe you can hear a little bit of it in the background now, you know, I'm getting all kinds of other noise in it, so it doesn't work all that well. So sometimes I'll fake that a little bit just to try to put some sort of natural sound in it. But I don't ever know which way to go. Because again, some people are going to like it and some people aren't. Best thing to do is just mute it and watch the beauty of whatever video, you know, whatever garden, you know, we're showing off, I guess. I don't know. Let's see. When should I plant bulbs in Arkansas? So, you know, some of this depend. I mean, Arkansas is pretty tall, so I imagine there's a big difference between the bottom of Arkansas and the top of Arkansas in terms of weather. But typically, sometime after you get a couple of frost is when we'll put our bulbs in the ground. So you know that soil temperature is cold enough that there's not any kind of chance that they're going to just start growing automatically. So I would let the ground temperature cool off. You know, probably if the ground temperature is below 60, for sure, you can get a soil thermometer and check that, or you can just wait for a few frost later in October and then put them in the ground after that. There's a delicate balance here because those bulbs get ripped out of the ground in Europe for the most part, not all, but a lot of them do, shipped across the ocean, and as soon as they come out of the ground, they're dying. And so you want to get them in as soon as you possibly can to prevent them from losing water and, you know, continuing to fade. But if you get them in too early into warm soils, they may try to grow on us, especially if you're cold treating any of them. If you're cold treating any of them, you want to wait until the soil is really cold. Because once you cold treat them, once you've put them in a refrigerator and given them chill hours, they're very likely to come up in warmer soil. So keep that in mind. But most of, you know, it's the one nice thing ordering from Color Blends and, you know, some of the online places is Color Blends will send them to you when it's time to put them in the ground. You know, that's kind of ideal. Or they'll send them to you when it's time to put them in the refrigerator, or they'll chill them for you. So there is, you know, some benefit to ordering, you know, that way, because they'll just send them to you at the appropriate time for your area. Somebody has a large pollinator bed with all hot colors, so reds, oranges, yellow, and said it's on fire. How can they calm it down? So, you know, definitely, you know, soft purples and whites, light, you know, lavender colors, you know, are good for calming spaces down. And if you use all of those colors, then it gets so calmed down. You know, we have two variations of this in the home garden. You know, if you see in these tour videos where we go with the really hot colors in some areas, oranges and reds and yellows. And then in another spot, we have lavenders and whites and used purple foliage and that kind of thing, which, you know, is a very muted version of that other thing. But white is always, you know, a good cooling thing to add to a space to calm it down just a bit. But I don't think there's any real reason to calm it down. I love those beds that you can see, you know, from the moon. Those are some of my favorite ones when I see them. It's just a really wacky, you know, outlandish color combinations that we can come up with. And sometimes you'll think that two colors won't go together, reds and oranges and things like that. And then, you know, Steph is really good at that, about going through. And, you know, we'll go to Big Bloomers or someplace and just pick a color that you're really drawn to and put it on the cart. And then take the cart around the store and put something next to it, put things next to it. And you may find color combinations that really work well together that you don't expect. And that's a strategy that we use. And I've used for all kinds of design related things. There might be a shrub, a perennial, a tree, anything like that. You put it on the cart and then you go around and you can say, ooh, I want to put this perennial in, but I'd like to put some sort of ground cover with it that has a different texture, different leaf color, different flower color, whatever. And then you can match things up, you know, as you go through the store, which is much easier, obviously, in spring when the stores are chock-a-block full of color and, you know, they're ordering fresh things in every week. So I had said that the best time to work in the garden is very early in the morning and not in the evening when it's much, you know, because it doesn't really cool off all that much for us, and you know, until midnight or after in Raleigh. And they said, any advice on how to become a morning person? No, I have no idea. I have been cursed with this. It's a curse, not a good thing. I wake up at first light. It doesn't matter. I could go to bed at 3 a.m. or 9 p.m. or 7 p.m. It wouldn't matter what time I go to bed. When the first hint of sun comes up, I'm up, and here I am. Nothing I can do about it. I kind of jealous of folks that can occasionally roll over and, you know, tune that out and sleep another 2 hours. I wish I could do that sometimes. Let's see. So had this ongoing conversations about things getting started early, the fall blooming things, late summer blooming things, blooming super early this year. Does that mean they're going to wind down early? It probably just depends on weather. You know, if it gets cooler, that can extend the flower time of some of these things that should be blooming a little bit later. If it stayed super, super hot, got dry, continued to be dry wherever you are, because I think it's still dry. People that didn't get any of the tropical storm rain probably are still a little bit dry. Probably Atlanta got none of that rain. So, you know, they got some rain, but they probably, you know, that 6 inches of rain we got from that event kind of really caught us up, you know, for most of the deficit that we had, but some areas probably still haven't. And those things are probably going to wind down a little quicker if they're under stress. And how would that change the weekly garden calendar that we sell also over on the website? And there's also a discount below. Not a lot. There's nothing. I mean, you know, the things that we're talking about at this point on the weekly garden calendar for August and September, generally speaking, don't do things. You know, this is the time of year when I say stop doing things, because you can cause more damage typically, and there's a question about that coming up in just a minute. But you can sometimes do more damage doing things right now before things shut down than not. So not a lot of difference there. Do we ever consider using mycorrhizal fungi for planting tubers or rhizomes or anything else? They're planting Indian pinks. Boy, Indian pinks are one of those perennials that just were always such a great perennial, and just nobody noticed it, and now they're everywhere. It's kind of fun. Doesn't matter what garden I go to now, it's Indian pinks are being used, great native. And then Virginia bluebells. Does adding mycorrhizal fungi make a difference? And do we have a preferred product? Well, when we fertilize with plant tone in the February or March every year, it contains some mycorrhizal fungi. I never have. It's in the air we breathe. It's everywhere. There's really no purpose in putting it down. The main things you need to do for mycorrhizal fungi is not to put it in the hole necessarily. It's to make sure you're building soil that's capable of it living in that soil. So making sure the soil's covered, you know, starting your garden with wood chips or mulching or compost or something that makes sure that your soil doesn't go through extreme dry and extreme wet and extreme everything, right? So if your soil's in pretty good shape, the plants that you're plugging into the ground will form relationships with mycorrhizal fungi that meet its needs. You know, we act like, I mean, there's a lot of different species of it. So there's probably way more than we could ever know. And most plants do have a relationship with mycorrhizal fungi. What it does is it literally attaches to the roots of your plants and forms a symbiotic relationship where this Rudbeckia here is gathering sunlight and creating sugars through making chlorophyll. And that sugars are going down and feeding the mycorrhizal fungi because it doesn't have access to the sunlight. And in return, the mycorrhizal fungi is feeding it nutrients and bringing it water and all kinds of things that they can do with it. Basically, they're intertwined. They become one thing, basically. And most plants, again, not all plants, but most plants have some sort of either beneficial bacteria. Beneficial bacteria can be just as important as mycorrhizal fungi. So there's a lot of different relationships these beneficial soil life has with our plants. But most of it just exists, and really, rather than worrying about, if I just clear cut everything in the garden and it was just pure dirt, basically, I mean, down to just nothing but the soil. I just stripped it off, all the organic material, all the plants, the mulch, everything. And I started planting plants and started dumping mycorrhizal fungi in the soil with the plant. That relationship's still not going to work properly because it's going to die. And super hot days, super cold days, everything that goes wrong in that big open space is not going to it's not going to be treated well in poor soil conditions. So concentrate more on improving your soil and plant the plants, and then those things will show up. It's everywhere around us. It's not to say that there might not be some initial benefit in putting it there. I'm not saying there's not, but I've never once intentionally gone out of my way to use it, and you can see the garden in Raleigh. But again, there is some mycorrhizal fungi in the plant tone when we use that in February. So there is some going down, but I would use a product without it too. It wouldn't bother me at all. Okay. Okay, so somebody lives outside of Charleston, South Carolina. They got 17 inches of rain from Tropical Storm Debbie. So I got no rain and I wish I'd have gotten some, and then 17 inches, which is just way more than anybody. I mean, there's never a happy medium with these tropical systems, really. Their tractor seat plants, or Farfugium, are severely wilted. Are they drowned? ? One was established and 3 were fairly new. Is there any hope? Most of the time, I would say no on root rot. If I walk past something that's wilted from wet feet, I typically, just from years, grown millions of plants in a nursery setting, know that when I see that wilt, I know I've overwatered it. I know there's some sort of pathogen that's now attacking the roots, and they're probably gone. It doesn't mean, though, that an super established one might not try to poke back up, and there's really no reason to dig them out. But I will say that I've always said this, underwatering something, if something out here is wilting and it's telling me it's dry and I come out here and water it, most of the time will perk back up. It may not look as fresh as it did before. It may have some burned leaves and, going through some sort of, sunburn basically from being dry. But most of it, at least it will live. But when you overwater something, the roots get rotted, and then pathogens can easily find their way into those roots and kill them. Let's see. Is Steph's sister a gardener? So last week I was talking about the first sister's garden, or the first sister. Yes, and we spent some time in her garden down in Delaware, helping with design before we left. And then the second sister's over in Maryland. She is as well, but and then you can see here this perennial border up in Connecticut. And I'm looking at a blue spruce and lots of other. This is a very mature landscape actually here in Connecticut. The lots are pretty big here in this area of Fairfield, and just this little grassy field back here is bigger than our lot in Raleigh. But they all got this from their dad, and that's what they'll tell you is Steph's talked about her dad in several videos about how much of an avid gardener he was. So they all got it from him. Let's see. Somebody has a purple pixie loropetalum in a pot. They're wondering if they wrap the pot in burlap for the winter. Will that help it not die from the cold? Because they don't want to wrap the top, because purple pixie loropetalum is very brittle. A lot of loropetalum in general can be brittle, especially when they're small. I always pointed out in loropetalum videos never to pull one out by the top. There's some plants that you can just grab the top and pull out of the container, no problem. You do that with loropetalum, you're just going to come out with the top of the plant, and the roots are still going to be in the pot. They break off pretty easy when they're small, and purple pixie just kind of stays that way because it's a dwarf. Wrapping in burlap will help some. I think there probably will be a couple of nights, if you're concerned about it, where you're going to need to either bring that container into a garage or put some sort of you'd be better off probably getting a frost protection blanket, which you could just order off of Amazon. I think I probably have one down in the Amazon store, linked below the video. But burlap is too heavy you wouldn't want to put that on top of the plant. So you could put the burlap around the pot, and then when you got to nights that might freeze the pot solid, you could put the frost protection blanket over the top, which is a much lighter cloth, but it'll add several degrees to to the, it will prevent that soil down below from freezing solid. You can put a couple layers on, probably. It's inexpensive material. And then refold it and use it again the following year. But it's light. It's intentionally made light enough to not damage plants when you cover it. Frost protection blanket. So on August, on the week 2 of the August, on the weekly garden planner, again, it's for sale over on the website, discount down below the video, I say no more general pruning this time of summer, this late summer period of time. They have a 9-foot gardenia, and they're in zone 8A. They want to shear it back because it's blocking a window. When should they prune it? They wanted to do it now, even though I said no general pruning. So the problem with pruning at this time in the late summer is that plants, a lot of times cutting them, they respond to that with growth. And so most plants are in the process of winding down. The days are getting shorter. They're in they've put on all that really big spring growth, whatever flowering they did, and now they're in the process of winding down for the season, and we're only at this point 2 months away from fall color on things, maybe earlier up here where I'm at right now. And pruning them is going to, especially on a leafy evergreen shrub that's from Asia, it's out of place already, it could trigger some new growth on it, and that new growth could get damaged. A 9-foot tall gardenia is probably been there long enough that you're not ultimately going to hurt it if you need to do some general pruning on it. It's also the age of the plant is going to have some impact on this. A very young plant or a stressed plant, or those might not be the plants you'd want to do general shearing on. If you needed to on this, you could probably get away with it. It might get nicked just a little bit on a frost, going into our first frost or freeze in the fall. But I would probably just wait until April, and then you can cut it about as hard as you ever wanted to cut it. And I think you'd be better off. If it's blocking a window and it's a security issue, then go ahead and prune it. There's always some reason that you still, that you have to do things sometimes when they're not the best times. And if you're dealing with a 9-foot older plant, that's the kind of plant that could take it if you had to. Okay. Somebody has a ruby slippers, oak leaf hydrangea. This was one of the fun things at the Mount Cuba Center. There are oak leaf hydrangea trials going on. The Mount Cuba Center does trialing on native plants and then the named cultivars and varieties that have been introduced into the trade. And so they do comparison trials between all the things that are available on the market versus the straight species, the one that just grew naturally as a native plant. And so the hydrangea arborescens was the report they released last year. I think it was the one last year. And basically they had the straight hydrangea arborescens, a great native smooth hydrangea. And then they put all of the named varieties. They compared all the named cultivars, and then did the pollinator counts on them, so they can compare how many pollinators were visiting the named varieties versus the straight species, how they operated as just ornamental plants in general. And you can go and see. You can actually go and buy some of the named cultivars, and they perform just as well or better than the native species in terms of drawing pollinators into your garden and being perhaps slightly better ornamental plants overall. They're doing, so when we were there with Sam the other day, they're in the process of oak leaf hydrangeas. I think their next report is actually on goldenrod, which was kind of fun because 3 years in the ground there, they're trialing them. You could really see which ones were performing well in the garden. But okay, anyway, ruby slippers, one of the oak leaf hydrangeas they had there in the trial. I think that information will be like 2 years from now. The ruby slippers looked great in the ground and they're trialing. Can they deadhead it? Yeah, so you can go right under the flower and cut it off. Some people like, ruby slippers goes from white to a kind of a reddish color and then to brown. If it's under stress, it may skip that reddish color and go to just that papery color that hydrangeas become. They want to know if they can deadhead it, just it's not attractive on their plant. Yeah, you just go right under the flower and clip them off. Don't go too far down the stem because they are in the process of setting flower buds for next year on the oak leaf hydrangeas. Somebody did my version of air layering a Osmanthus fragrans and a panicle hydrangea, so hydrangea paniculata, into a container. So if you saw the video I did last year, easiest way to propagate plants, I think is what I called it. I just bend a limb over into a container and put some soil on it, and it roots right in the container. So then when you cut it away from the plant, now you have your plants already in the container. It's just a different form of air layering that I've used for a long time. They want to know when to cut it from the parent plant. So the panicle hydrangea, both of them have rooted. The Osmanthus fragrans and the panicle hydrangea have rooted, so it worked perfectly for them. The panicle hydrangea, you could cut anytime. Those are zone 3 hardy. So, I don't think you're gonna have a problem with your panicle hydrangea. You can cut it away from the parent plant and keep it, and then, just keep it in the pot through the winter. The Osmanthus fragrans, I might use the fact that it's attached to the parent plant to get it through the winter and then cut it away in the early spring, because it's a much more, this is zone 8A Tennessee. Also 8A Tennessee is probably, of the 8A areas, I would think that it's probably the, on the colder side and a lot more wind. So I'd probably leave the Osmanthus connected to the plant. Again, the zone 3 hydrangea anywhere, anytime you want to cut it. Person thin crepe myrtles that are in the shade, will they fill back in? Okay, so they're stretching. They got crepe myrtles that are in too much shade. They're stretching like crazy. They cut them, and then they want to know whether they're going to fill back in. Unlikely, because the problem with crepe myrtles is, there's a lot of plants that will do this. That root system is getting bigger and bigger under the ground. And every time you cut it, it grows back faster than the last time you cut it. And it's gonna grow back faster and thinner each time. And it's just gonna be even more wispy. Some things this works for, some kind of minor pruning on boxwoods or hollies, or, maybe a conifer that's in a little bit of light shade, azaleas, you can get away with it. This little bit of pruning on it, it actually makes them fuller. But with something like a crepe myrtle that comes out of the ground, it wakes up a little later than most deciduous things, and then it tends to grow 4 to 6 feet before it flowers. It's going to do that really wispy every time in the shade, and even more wispy with a bigger root system, because it's going to have more growth on it each year going forward. So I think they probably need to be moved out into more sun if you want to keep them. It's just not a great candidate for that. Let's see. Person needs encouragement to plant tomatoes and vegetables in their front garden. If you're not in an HOA, it's your land. You own it. So the way, we've got a couple versions of this in our neighborhood, because we're in an old neighborhood. It has no HOA, and we have a couple versions of it. There's a couple that just line them up like they're they have some sort of farm where there's straight rows of tomatoes and peppers and things like that in their front yard. Literally, like they got a tractor somewhere and they're going to go harvest these things in a straight line, which is fine. Whatever version works for you, right? But I kind of like the version, if you're going to grow them in your front garden, to have them in a landscaped space, to have your, tomatoes growing on something that's kind of neater looking. You can grow a lot of herbs as ground covers around them. You can grow a lot of herbaceous perennials that will help draw in pollinators to make sure all of your vegetables are getting pollinated. Tomatoes are self-pollinating, but even they're helped with pollinators as well to make sure every flower gets pollinated. But create design with it. Use it as design. I could go out in my front garden's got plenty of sunlight, and if I didn't have rabbits causing me problems out there, I would have my my vegetables just blended into my landscape. And in fact, Steph is eating a ton of eggplants. She makes ratatouille, and I bet she's used 100 of those eggplants that were grown in our annual border in the front garden. 100 might be exaggeration, 50 plus for sure of those eggplants. She'll come in with a big giant thing of them. She makes ratatouille, gives it to a couple neighbors. She was doing that all summer. But they were part of our ornamental landscape in the front garden. None of these things are unattractive. So again, there's two versions of it, but you do what you want to do. But definitely, if that's your sunny space to grow something that for yourself that makes you happy, it doesn't matter what other people think. It's not their garden, and just do it. Somebody has a bird of paradise. They started from a seed in Zone 8A, Texas. It's currently about 18 inches tall. Do they need to bring it inside for the winter or plant it in the garden? I think that you're likely going to need to bring that thing in for this first winter for sure. I mean, I'm in Zone 8A in Raleigh, and we don't really grow bird of paradise outside. It's probably maybe Jacksonville, Florida, where I would see the first one. That may not be accurate. They might be in Savannah. But it's pretty far south of me before I see them being grown outside. Again, I don't know about 8A where you are in Texas, but I would think that you would probably want it again. And you're also talking about the planting time. You're talking about, I would bring it inside to make sure for this winter, because I don't even know that they are hardy in Zone 8A outside, especially in a windy space, maybe where you are in Texas, which a lot of Texas is very windy. Let's see. Somebody has a massive whitefly infestation on their vegetable garden. They said they've kept an eye on it, like I've talked about, and then it just continues to be bad. Is there anything they can do, or should they pull them out? What I would maybe consider doing is thinning it out some. So things like your tomatoes, which will get whiteflies if they're under any kind of stress, as the tomato plants get bigger and bigger, they're no longer flowering down at the base, and it's probably helpful to start taking limbs off the bottom as the season goes on, and that will allow a lot more air movement into the garden. You can do the same thing on peppers, old leaves down toward the bottom of the peppers. You might just get in there and thin out foliage that could be gotten rid of, and that may be helpful. You might even consider taking out every other plant. If you have any that are, pick a couple that are under stress and get rid of them entirely. That may be helpful as well. And then I take the water hose and just, I hose them off. I just drown lots of whiteflies. Every single time I use the water hose, I would be drowning whiteflies. And that's kind of the way I would handle that. Other people are going to use soap and other things. Whiteflies are very soft-bodied insects. Gardenias get them bad. There was a gardenia question back there. And I talked about them on lantana last week. Lantana tend to get them bad. It's usually under some sort of stressed situation. You may see that in the future if you continue to compost your vegetable garden and improve conditions in there, that you may see less issues going forward as well. But yeah, get in there and thin as much foliage out as you can, and maybe remove a couple plants, and then I use the water hose to drown whiteflies. I'm pretty vicious, doing that with that technique. So somebody said, what are a few camellia sasanquas that will grow faster to 12 to 15 feet in 7B, Tennessee? So this is another, I know you're in 7B, and I know most camellias are hardy from 7 to 9, but 7B on the Tennessee side, they're definitely going to be more vulnerable to freeze. And so the fastest growing camellia sasanqua that I know of is Alabama Beauty. That thing, I see them in 3-gallon containers. They'll be this tall where other ones will be this tall. That's a very fast growing camellia sasanqua. And it seems to be pretty cold hardy. So that would be one that would be on my list. And then from there in 7B, Tennessee, I might consider using the Zone 6 hardy camellias. So the ones that were bred to be more cold hardy, the winter series, and there's a couple different series of Zone 6. You can go on the Camellia Forest website and find the Zone 6 camellias. Don't know, camellias are just notoriously slow. That's one of the reasons they're kind of expensive. I try to point that out on videos when I can. There's a hellebore right here that's going to be off camera that's, of course, bloomed it back in maybe April here, March or April. They tend to be more expensive because it takes about 3 years to make a 1-gallon container. Whereas I can take a plug on this Rudbeckia and grow it out in months. So there's difference in pricing for those reasons. Same thing with camellias. It would take me 3 full years to grow a really good full 1-gallon camellia. from a rooted cutting. You know, you're basically a rooted cutting for a year, and then 2 years to have a really nice plant that another nursery could finish in a 3-gallon within a single year, because that's what those guys, most of those guys want to be 12 months in the container and gone. So they're not fast growing. But you might consider just in that area to use Zone 6 or slightly more cold hardy varieties. Somebody has suckering crepe myrtles after planting hostas around them. Are the hostas hurting them? When should they pull the suckers? Get the suckers immediately, for sure. Get those off as quick as possible. But there is definitely a possibility that nicking the roots when you were planting the hostas is what caused the suckering. Almost certainly is, you know, any kind of damage to the roots is going to be the reason that they would start suckering. You know, new pieces would start emerging from the ground, you know, all around it. But get them off as quick as possible. You want those, you want to starve them. Okay, so anything, this is any weed, any vine, any invasive plant, any plant sucker, anything about when do I remove it? Yesterday is the answer, because you're trying to deny it light. I mean, I was talking about this, you know, these leaves are just solar panels that are collecting energy and allowing that plant to produce sugars, which feed itself and the things down below. And, you know, the more it's feeding itself, the more it's going to keep coming. So get things out as quick as possible to deny them light. You're probably going to continue to get some suckers on. Crepe myrtles just sucker. If you watched the Norfolk Botanic Garden video the other day, they get suckers on those that V of crepe myrtles they have. Basically, they start on one end and take the suckers out, and then they can basically start over. That's how much suckering happens on old crepe myrtles like that. Okay, let's see. 2 more, and we'll wrap this up. Somebody said my opinion on cedar mulch. I think I've answered this in the past. I like the look of cedar mulch for sure. A lot of times, and really in the history of gardening, a lot of mulching was what mulch can I get that I don't have to do it very often, right? That's the answer. Whereas I've been trying to teach for 7 years that the best kind of mulch are the mulches that you need to do more often, because they're breaking down pretty quickly. And you go to Mount Cuba Center, Ladue, all of these gardens that I'm visiting, it's done with leaf mulch and wood chips and natural materials that break down pretty quickly. Of course, they have a gardening staff and that can remulch it. So, and I know that's what somebody's going to hear from me saying that. But they're using materials that break down readily. And so cedar mulch doesn't break down as quick. What I would use cedar mulch for is my paths. I like my mulched paths, when I use the wood chips, but I could see myself using cedar mulch for the paths, because it would make my paths last longer, and all the foot traffic that I'm putting on them. It feels nice to walk on, nice material for that. But in terms of putting it in the beds, there's nothing wrong with it. Not saying there's anything wrong with it, but the fact that it breaks down slower is the opposite of kind of what I'm trying to do, which is get my soil eating the organic material on top to feed itself. So it does slow that process down. No problem with cedar mulch. I like the look of it. I love the smell of it. I used a lot of it as a landscaper, but I tended to use it in path work and not in my planted spaces. Okay, so somebody has a Deodar cedar 2 feet from their foundation. Should they move it in the fall or late winter? Well, if you can, the late winter is probably the best time to do it. But you could do it anytime after you got a frost or freezes, and that conifers tend to grow when it's cool outside. So you're going to get growth on that thing, typically in the fall. As the temperatures drop, the soil moisture comes up a bit. That's when it's going to grow some. So for me, it's not ideal to move it then, but you could. I would rather move it on the other side of winter, probably ideally. But you'll see a lot of your conifers putting on growth, in the next couple of months when everything else is kind of shutting down. They're like, yeah, it's good, cooler nights. They tend to enjoy that time of year. Looking at a emerald arborvitae over there by the house, and I can see it has new growth on it here toward the end of August. Okay. Thank you guys very much. Again, if you got any recommendations on anything up in upstate New York and over to over toward Buffalo or around in Ontario for us to do, let us know. And again, the Learn to Garden video series is $50 off for the rest of August. The code is August, and it's over on the website. A new video did go up on it this past week. And thank you guys so much for watching.